Hello, hello, hello. And we are back. We are back. This is our second authority conversation. We just wrapped conversations about the emotional authority, which was beautiful. And so we want to welcome you to this topic, which is splenic authority. Definitely let us know if you're here. I see a few people coming in. So definitely let us know if you're here. Let us know where you're coming in from in the chat. We will have two moments, one midway and one at the end for a little bit of Q&A. And so as questions arise, feel free to put them in the chat real time so that once we get on break, we can answer them for you. And then I think that's it. My name is Mélissa. I'm here. This is the Energy Ergonomics live streams. If you're on the YouTube channel, definitely subscribe. It's brand new. And we are so excited to bring you this super valuable information that is going to help you come home to yourself, thrive in partnerships, get in flow, build a life that you absolutely love. Today, we are graced by Jaclyn Michelle, our special guest. I'm gonna bring her up here so that as I say sweet things about her, she can see me and get embarrassed if she'd like.
I love you. She knows I'm working on receiving compliments. It's part of my own kind of journey.
Yes. So Jaclyn is a shadow work queen. And she will be your Persephone. She is from my perspective, and that's why she's here with me. She's just the best person to work on to work on human design with. If you're really here to get thorough, if you're here to really work on digging into you, understanding yourself, if you're ready to face those shadows and learn from them, and also learn from them in a really compassionate way, this is the person for you. And so I'll say that for me, I met Jaclyn partway through my journey. Her nerdiness about human design became contagious, and I went down a very deep rabbit hole, very, very deep, and then committed to spending the last year following my authority. And that journey has completely changed my life. And so that is why we are here sharing this information. We're keeping it accessible. We're keeping it free. We're giving you some really good ways to connect in with your authority. And the reason is because it will change your life. And so with that, I will let Jaclyn properly introduce herself and introduce Splenic Authority to you all. Awesome.
Sounds good. Yay. So
I
was going to share my screen. I was sharing with everyone earlier, PowerPoint is my love language. I definitely am a big giant nerd that way. So I want to share with you just quickly who I am, what I do. And if you were here for the previous authority, like, hi again. We're going to do really quick, and then I will walk you through what splenic authority is and kind of introduce you to that concept. So my name is Jaclyn Michelle, as Mélissa said. I am the voice behind the website Interior Creature. So basically, when I came to human design after I had left kind of a corporate position, I had been involved in a career path that basically left me feeling like I didn't remember who I was outside of my job. And so I needed a tool to kind of help me come back home to myself, right? And so I've always been interested in the occult, the esoteric, like metaphysical. I was that kid at the library grabbing books on astral projection and like slipping them under my Sweet Valley High to hopefully my mom wouldn't notice what I was taking out. But anyway, I've always been interested in things seen and unseen. And so human design actually was recommended to me as a tool to kind of figure out what happened next on my kind of personal and professional journey. And as I started exploring the system, I realized that at the time, so many resources were written in a way that was just very dense, very like reference material-y, like they weren't super accessible. So I've always been a writer. I started interiorcreature.com in 2018 to help people find practical, actionable, accessible, understandable tools to help them make sense of the system and then actually do something with it. And so since about that time, I also opened my virtual doors to do readings. And I've done, my goodness, about 2,000, a little bit more one-on-one readings over this time of just helping people understand their chart. And I've expanded my offerings in the past couple of years. So I not only do readings, I do them at 3 different entry points. because as much as I love introducing people to human design for the first time, I know there's a lot of folks out there like me that were plugging away on their own and trying to figure out like their own chart, etc. So I also wanted to make sure that I had resources dedicated to folks who are a little bit deeper in the journey, right? So there's different entry points of readings to kind of meet you where you are in understanding your own chart. I teach classes, which Mélissa came to one of my classes, just to understand the foundational aspects of the system to like utilize it for not just yourself, but for others. And most recently, I've opened my doors for 2 different communities. We have the Catalyst community, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, which is all about catalyzing your spiritual journey, giving you community around like learning these different modalities that help you come home to yourself. And then our my favorite program is our shadow work and deconditioning program, Karmic Studies, where we go deep and really put to work everything in our chart to kind of, come to ourselves in that way. And it's all through like, again, shadow work, deconditioning, really kind of getting in touch with what we find in our chart and making it actionable. And for those of you who are also fellow human design nerds, I'm a generator, I have sacral authority, but I have my spleen defined. I'm only sacral spleen root in my chart. I'm also what I affectionately call a projector's generator, because my entire chart is open beyond my spleen, my sacral, and my root. So I have a lot of that kind of, probing empathy that one would associate with a projector. And I'm the 1-3 right angle cross of the Garden of Eden. So compassion is literally like the thing I'm put on this planet to do. So anyway, and if you end up hearing grunts, snorts, barks, anything in the background, my other passion beyond human design is rescue dogs. These are my 3. So, I always joke that I live in a zoo. So if you happen to hear any sort of, noises in the background, they're just really passionate about human design as well. Sometimes they like to chime in, but most of them are sleeping right now. So I think we should be good. Okay. So I want to introduce you to Splenic authority. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what it is, how to feel it, how to experience it, how to let it guide your decision making. And then we'll stop for some questions and answers. And then Melissa's going to come back with, she has such amazing kind of aligned action steps you can take to actually drop into your body and put this into practice. So if you're here, you run your human design chart, you have it handy, you know that you have splenic authority, that your spleen is guiding your decision making. So we're going to talk first about what the spleen is, what it does, and then we'll dive in even further. But before we kind of get into that, I just want to anchor ourselves in one of the kind of primary, foundational understandings of human design is everybody but a very small percentage of people in human design, we need to get out of our brain and get into our body. Now, most of us have been conditioned to be like rational, logical decision makers, right? Like I was sharing earlier, I was raised by a professor and an accountant, and they were very much like, if you're making a big decision, you need to make a pros and cons list, talk it out, what's most pragmatic, what's most rational. And we never had conversations about intuition, right? And what's beautiful about the human design system is it not only aims to reconnect you to your intuition, but it actually shows you how valuable your intuitive voice can be. And each of us have a slightly different one. If you have splenic authority, your spleen is your intuitive voice. It's the part of you and part of your energy that's trying to guide you toward the right decisions that are safe, that are healthy, that feel vibrant and exciting, and away from the things that are not for you in that way. And so a big part of really aligning with your chart and kind of doing this deconditioning work is getting out of our brain, trying to drop into our body and allow our spleen to talk to us, without repressing its messages or ignoring its messages or trying to over rationalize its messages, letting it talk to us, and then having that inform how we make decisions moving forward. So we're going to talk about a lot of that as we keep going. So let's start with the spleen though. What is the spleen? What does it do? How does it feel in the body? I have it defined. It's not my authority, so I'm familiar with all of this. And so hopefully there may also be folks here who it's not your authority, but like me, it is defined in your chart. So it is going to be like a consistent energetic presence. So if you look on the left side of my screen toward the bottom, you'll see there's a little white arrow pointing. That's where the spleen lives in the body. The spleen in human design is one of 2 centers that governs kind of our adrenal responses, right? Now, I know the adrenals are governed by a different organ in the body, but this is metaphor. I always joke like, the solar plexus is not where the solar plexus lives. The heart lives in a different place. It's not a body scan. It's not anatomically correct. It's a metaphor. But in human design, our spleen metaphorically is in charge of basically our fight or flight response. So I like to think of our spleen, for those of us who have it defined or closed in our chart, it is consistently scanning our environment and it's looking for any sort of like threats to our livelihood. Now, what's a threat has evolved a lot over time. So think about our like collective ancient ancestors. Like we're in Mesopotamia, we're dodging woolly mammoths and trying to find our food, right? Like our spleen used to tell us that is your food. Here's the fight response. Go pounce on it. Here's that rush of adrenaline. Or here's that rush of adrenaline to get the heck out of here because that saber-toothed tiger is about to eat you. I may have my arrows messed up. I'm not sure if those animals were still around during Mesopotamia time, but you know what I mean? Like we were fleeing from predators using that big adrenal like rush of like flight energy, or getting our food, living another day with that fight response, right? Now, as society has changed over the years and gone through that kind of agrarian organization and then industrial, and now where we are right now in kind of this capitalist paradigm, what's a threat has evolved. So things that are threats these days could be someone lying to you. It could be someone totally misrepresenting themselves and their abilities and their talents. It could be somebody trying to push a solution that's irresponsible or not actually going to solve the problem. The spleen is literally one of my favorite centers because each one of the gates governs like one of the ways that our spleen tries to keep us safe by just letting us know that's not effective, that's not efficient, or that's super meaningful. Yeah, that's really responsible. I don't know how honest that is, but it's using the old software to talk to us. So just like you've ever seen someone who has like a really expensive, tech forward phone, but it's got the rotary ringer, that's kind of like what the spleen is doing. It's using that literally adrenal fight or flight response to talk to us. Now, the intensity of that response sometimes is proportional to the stimulus, and sometimes it's way out of balance. Everybody is a little bit different in that way. And so another thing to kind of think about too is, and again, this is not something you need to share with us in the confines of this kind of conversation, but I know for my own self, like I am a survivor of sexual violence. Trauma was a part of my, adolescence, young adulthood. Feeling my own body and listening to its messages was something I had a very kind of tenuous relationship with. So allowing myself to feel safe enough in my body to let my kind of fight or flight responses guide me was something that it took a lot of work to kind of get to, right? So the goal though is to eventually create a healthy, supportive relationship with these messages and allow them to build that trust and to build that surrender to say, okay, if my body is telling me something is off, something is not okay, I'm going to honor that, right? So we talked a little bit about this with emotional authority as well. Generators and manifesting generators can't have splenic authority in their chart because by definition, they always have their sacral closed, and the sacral is the more powerful center. But you can still have it defined in your chart. So if you're here because it's closed in your chart, it's not going to be like your main decision maker, but it's something I definitely wouldn't ignore because it's still scanning your environment, scanning the people in it, picking up on the vibes, if you will, about what's safe and what isn't. So it's part of the kind of alchemy of the messages your body is sending you about what's safe, what's healthy, what's supportive, what isn't, right? Projectors and manifestors, they're the two types where this can actually be their authority. And so for manifestors, that splenic kind of message is the thing that's going to help you as you're informing others. And it's also going to inform you about what you're walking toward, what you're walking away from. And projectors, again, they have the wait for recognition and an invitation as their strategy. They're consistently and continuously checking in with their gut to figure out what feels safe, what doesn't, right? The other type on the screen that can't have splenic authority are our reflectors. And I know on Friday, Mélissa and I are going to be talking a lot about lunar authority, what that means, what that feels like. But reflectors by definition aren't going to have their spleen defined, and they're not going to have splenic authority. So for all of these types, one of the things you're going to notice is the word wait is in the strategy, except for pure manifestors. So we're going to talk in a moment about how manifestors navigate their splenic authority. But for everyone else who has the word wait and they have this center defined, the wait isn't you stopping and waiting for like the perfect circumstances or the perfect invitation or the perfect thing coming your way. It's an invitation for you to stop and say, what is my body trying to tell me? What is my intuitive voice trying to message to me about the health, the safety of the situation, the people, the circumstances, etc. And like feel that before you just take action. And this is one of the things that's helped me the most, especially as someone who has both the spleen and the sacral defined in my chart. I cannot tell you how many times over the years I look back and I'm like, I was making a decision because somebody else identified me with that decision, or someone else wanted me to commit to it. I was sponging, mirroring, magnifying through my open centers, and I wasn't actually waiting to listen to what my body was telling me. I was going with the new novel sensation, right? So if you have splenic authority, it really is important to kind of stop, anchor yourself in your intuitive voice, and get that clear message before you take action and move forward. So we're going to talk about how that works with each of the different types. So with the splenic authority, again, it feels like a fight or flight response, but sometimes it also feels like a deep inner knowing. Everyone's is a little bit different. Of the folks I've talked to over the years, some people do get it. Like if something is a splenic, yes, they get like a rush of adrenaline. They're red, they're sweaty, they're leaning in, their heart's racing. They feel like they got like the butterflies in their throat. Other people feel it as just like a rise of kind of excited energy, right? But it's a little bit more subtle. A splenic no, like I know mine is like my knees get hollow. I get like a pit in my stomach, not kind of feeling. Sometimes I'll either go pale or I'll go red. Sometimes I get like little, like, I feel like my forehead's hot and I got little like pringlies, like little prickles or tinglies. Pringlies? It's my open throat. Anyway, we'll get those. But basically, it's like my body is just letting me know on a biochemical level, it feels reactive. It's almost like my body is reacting to some sort of stimulus in a way that's not intentional. It's not something I'm thinking through. It's just I'm getting a reaction. Or it's like that adrenal kind of fight or flight, right? And so again, it can involve chills, hot flashes, rushes of energy, draining of energy. A lot of people also just refer to it as just this inner kind of core knowing of like something is off, something is wrong. Now, the challenge is the splenic authority is about information, but it's also about vibes. So the spleen is not just reacting to everything that you know, like all the data that you've input into your body about the people, the space, whatever. It's also picking up on just like the general energy. So like weird example of this, I remember once going out to dinner with somebody and walking into that restaurant and just feeling super uncomfortable before we even like made it to the hostess stand. And I didn't know what it was. I just felt in my body like this tensing, this tightening. My heart was racing a little bit. I'm feeling a little uncomfortable. And then my friend who we went to go check in for our reservation, it turned out that they had just had like a really horrible medical incident with a customer, and everybody was kind of still amped from that, right? So it's not like you're psychic necessarily, but it is your body reading the energy of the environment and kind of picking up on like what's safe, what isn't. And then we have to decide once we have that information, do we stay in that restaurant or do we go and have dinner somewhere else, right? Okay, so who can have splenic authority? Projectors and manifestors, though gens and generators can still have this center defined in their chart. And we're going to use it for both little and big decisions. So everything from like, do I put that milk in my tea in the morning to like, do I, sell my house and buy a farm and milk my own cows every morning? Like, so little decisions, big decisions, you want to go with that, like your body basically telling you what feels safe, what feels healthy. And I always tell people as well, even if you have emotional authority or sacral authority, we don't ever want to ignore our defined spleen, right? Because the spleen, again, is picking up on stuff that just sometimes is like extra sensory. It's the vibes of the situation. And sometimes it has energy that we just don't have the rationale for yet or the evidence for yet, right? So it's an act of surrender. It's an act of grace and trust to just be like, I trust my body. If something's off, something is off. Or if something feels safe, then it's safe. Like another alternative example of this that's like supportive. I used to work as an educator. I was a literacy coach in a school for years, and I taught teachers how to teach kids how to read. And I remember one year, the principal and I were doing teacher hiring, and this woman came in for an interview, and just like she was just out of college, she had never taught before, but the vibe in the room, just the principal and I are just like, we're leaning in, we're red, we're sweaty, our faces are flushed. She left and we're like, we love her. And so even though her resume looked like she didn't have the experience, our body just knew she's going to like kick ass at this position. She's going to be such a good teacher. Hands down, one of the best teachers we ever hired. Like she was phenomenal and just had a natural aptitude for it. So that's our body. That's that spleen just picking up on like the vibes sometimes and giving you very clear messages. So projectors, when you have splenic authority and you're waiting for recognition, you're waiting for that invitation, you're also checking in with yourself about like the people who see you, hear you, value you, include you. Does it feel safe to be seen by them, heard by them, valued by them, included by them? Are they the right people for you? Is it, say it was like a job offer, for example, and you wanted to go with your gut. how did you feel when you were in that office, in that interview, in that circumstance with those people? Does it feel safe? Does it feel healthy? Does it feel supportive? And then when the invitation comes, again, are you getting that like rush of excitement, or are you getting a kind of like rush of dread, right? The absence of a splenic response, a lot of times that's the body going, I don't have enough information yet. So I find the spleen, again, it's hungry. It wants to know. So like feed it as much intel and data as you can, and it gives you then something to respond to, or gives the body something to respond to. For manifestors, because y'all are the doers, you are the initiators, you kind of get an impulse, an idea, and you were like off toward it. Just keep checking in with your spleen as you're doing the thing, right? As you're taking micro and macro actions toward whatever it is the thing is you're trying to build or do. If your body is telling you, ooh, this doesn't feel safe, or ooh, this doesn't feel okay, that's your invitation to pivot. That's your body saying, ooh, if this is not safe, then it's the now or the how that needs to change. And I know Mélissa is going to talk about that in a couple of minutes. But a lot of times when our body talks to us through our authority, it's not always that the thing itself is a no. It might be that it's a no right now, or this specific means of doing it is the no. So manifestors have to get kind of flexible and creative for when they pivot to figure out, okay, what is my spleen telling me is not safe or not right? Or what is my spleen is telling me it does feel safe and does feel good? The peace and the anger, the self and the not self theme of the manifestor, plus the splenic kind of yes and no, they're working in tandem to kind of guide you toward the things that are for you, because you're going to feel this a feeling of peace and ease and like excitement, or something that is like not for you. You're going to feel the anger and the dread, the kind of like fear, the, ooh, this doesn't feel safe, kind of clenching, tightening, right? The last thing I want to talk about before we open it up to questions is the difference between anxiety and intuition, because this comes up in my readings a lot. And as someone who I have clinical depression, I was diagnosed with it when I was very young. I am no stranger to anxiety gremlins, and there is a very big difference between like when our anxious brain is trying to maybe sabotage or detract or make us second guess from what our body is telling us, versus what is pure body level intuition. So if it is your spleen, I find personally in my experience and in a lot of my clients' experiences, the body reacts before the brain does. So say it is somebody asks you to get coffee, right? And it's somebody that stranger, just, your eyes meet across the room, they walk over, they ask you to get coffee with them. If your body is sending you a massive flood of like, no, you're getting like, you're hot, you're sweaty, you're not in your stomach, your knees feel hollow, you got the little forehead pringlies that I was calling a moment ago, the prickle tingles, right? That's your body's way of saying like something about this is unsafe. Now, if you started like immediately going, why are they asking me this? Who is this person? Like, am I attractive enough to be asked for coffee, etc.? Like that tends to be the anxiety, anxious brain. And then the body sometimes will react by generating that splenic kind of idea. So what typically happens is if it's intuition, the body gives you a very strong physical biochemical reaction, and then the brain tries to source it. So like, why am I getting like hot and sweaty? Why do I feel this like feeling of like unsafety or like, not feel, where is that coming from? That's the intuition, versus all of a sudden you're what about, what if, what about, what if? And then the body starts to respond because you're giving it information that may or may not be true, right? So anxiety tends to be brain before body. Intuition, which is your splenic authority, tends to be body before brain. So we are going to stop sharing my screen. I know Mélissa is going to pop back in, and we are going to open this up for questions. Any sort of questions? Looks like we had some folks here.
We had some fun. We had some vibes that were just not quite right.
Oh yeah, those are not vibes I would like to. Yeah, it's not with that. Oh my goodness.
We don't have any immediate questions. We do have some people on the line, so if
cool.
you have questions, let us know, and we will make sure we answer them. But I do want to give us a brief moment for a commercial break, not really, but I do want to give us an opportunity, and Jaclyn an opportunity as a guest on the channel, to talk about Catalyst, because I'm excited about Catalyst. And then just a little bit about Karmic Studies too, because Karmic Studies is currently running. So I gave you a lot, but we have a little time. And so I'd love for you to tell folks about the work you're doing with Catalyst, the work you're doing with Karmic Studies.
Yeah,
let's do that.
Yeah. And as I'm talking, feel free to put your comments, your questions, no nudes in the chat.
No,
Just no nudes, just
I will.
comments and questions. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad I couldn't see that as I was talking. Right. Anyway, so I have two amazing communities that I'm so honored to launch this year. So the first one is Karmic Studies. Karmic Studies is an opportunity to go way deep into basically shadow work and deconditioning. The whole kind of impetus behind human design was like, what if we listened to our intuitive voice? What if we made decisions in a way that was more aligned? And a lot of us, like, that wasn't the way we were raised. That wasn't the dominant conditioning we were given. So Karmic Studies is an opportunity to, like, in small community, go literally in minute detail, part by part in your chart, and kind of interrogate, what is my relationship to this specific aspect of my energy? Does it feel expansive? Does it feel restrictive? And like, what do I want to lean into deeper? And what do I want to maybe realign? Right. So that's what we do in Karmic Studies. It's a 6-month program, and we meet constantly. Like, I'm actually, my Karmic Studies folks and I are meeting tonight. We do these group integration sessions weekly where we just nerd out over like the transits that are happening and like what we noticed as we were doing our shadow work. But for something a little bit less intensive, I also launched Catalyst. So one of the things that I noticed, I don't know if I think I shared this earlier, being into things that are metaphysical, esoteric, spiritual can sometimes feel a bit lonely, because I know I've always been the person into astrology that was like afraid to mention it out at dinner when meeting new people, or, somebody mentions something, I'm like, oh, astral projection. They're like, how do you know what that is? And I always felt like it was something I need to keep hidden. Right. So having community around these things can be really helpful. So Catalyst is a community that I developed, and there's 2 different kind of wings to it. There's Catalyst Spark, which is for folks who have just kind of had their spiritual awakening, and they're looking for community as they start stepping into these spaces and learning to figure out what modalities in this metaphysical, esoteric, spiritual, occult space actually feel aligned and connected to them. It's an opportunity to kind of, again, in community, explore in a way that feels supportive and just accessible. So our first event is this weekend, and you are absolutely invited to join us. We are going to do a birth chart basics, and I'm doing a foundational kind of introduction to human design. Then there's also Catalyst Fire, which is for folks who've been on this spiritual journey a little bit longer and are basically looking for their nerd herd. They want to find people that they can have these high level kind of intimate conversations about, like a gate placement they're working through, or a tarot spread that didn't make sense to them, or whatever it is. It's like, here's your open-minded community of people who are actively working on, aligning to their higher self through a bunch of windows. They're open to learning about new modalities, deepening their own practice, but the language, just the experience with it is a little bit deeper. So it's just, again, 2 different, pathways to the same goal, which is just catalyzing our own growth in community with others.
I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. And so,
I see Grace Notes has a question.
yeah, Grace is asking us, do we have any suggestions for honing intuition? And so we do have some coming, but
Yeah.
why don't we, and if you have anything a little bit more specific, Grace, so what's about to come is a set of actions that are related to working on really trusting your authority for the most part. And then, but anything immediately, Jaclyn, I want to make sure we honor this question in the queue that has been asked. Anything that immediately pops up with you, and I.
Yeah. What I started to do was notice myself in like big spaces, big public spaces. Like, I'm a former New Yorker. I lived there for about a decade. I know that people always told me I had a good kind of like sense of like street smarts, if that makes sense, because I could always kind of tell what was safe, what wasn't. I started really just like bringing my awareness to what my body was doing when I was in public spaces, when I was in really crowded spaces, when I was in spaces that are a little bit more spread out. And I started just kind of tracking for myself, if I get a ping that something feels off, what does that literally feel like in my body? If I get a ping that something feels really safe, what does that feel like in my body? Another area where I do this is hiking. I am a big hiker. I love hiking alone. And over the years, though, being more in touch with like how my spleen talks to me has actually made me feel better about, okay, when I bring a dog, when I hike truly by myself, am I going to take this trail? Is it too like you mean, especially as a woman and, somebody who is, who hikes solo, like that becomes really important. So I think just noticing, bringing your awareness to it like that. I know that sounds maybe overly simplified, but I think once you kind of read all the different descriptions of what a splenic authority can feel like, just start, putting yourself in positions where your body has to talk to you. And then I know Mélissa is going to talk about some embodiment practices that, like, if you're just, again, like, for my own personal experience with trauma, like, I, for a long time, had kind of been in the habit of not listening or trying to suppress or repress or ignore or push down messages my body was sending me. And things for me myself, like meditation, that was really helpful to kind of allow whatever comes up to come up. So I know Melissa's got much more beautiful advice on that, but that's my like quick 30-second.
The other thing, I'm currently being trained in somatic breathwork. And what I love about somatic breathwork and somatic experiencing in general is there is an idea that sometimes we can't, like, we don't feel because we literally have hunkered down our body. We've suppressed feelings and we've repressed them, usually because trauma has occurred, or we've been trained to do that. We've been conditioned to do that. And so when we talk about honing intuition, there may be resistance in the body at times. And so I love somatic breathwork is what I've recently found, and it's just been really intense around for me personally, because as someone who already felt very intuitive and very tapped in, the levels have been increasing and increasing and increasing and increasing. And it's actually this specific breath work and somatic experiencing work that I've been doing that has unlocked that for me. And I'm someone who practices like yoga, qigong, dance, other things. And so believe it or not, breath can be a very, very informative and useful tool to like get back into the body and for release. And just different forms of trauma release can be supportive in helping you continue to hone your intuition. That's one of the things I don't have on the page. I'm about to show you of a whole set of things, which the first one is actually around presence. So we are coming to that, Grace. If you have any more questions, please pop them in the chat. There is no limit on questions, and we will continue to answer them. All right. And so as we jump into the next portion of this, and any other questions that come through, we will get them at the end of the session once I'm done sharing around how we take all the beautiful knowledge that Jaclyn gave us to use our authority wisely, or rather actually listen to it, right? There is only one way to use it. It's always wise. And so what you're going to see is if you have signed up for email. So I know some people have stumbled across this on YouTube, Facebook, any of the other platforms we've been live streaming on. But there was an email sign up. So if you go through and go to woofulness.com/authority and sign up, what you will get is a series of practice guided practices and documents that will help you on your journey to use your authority. And in addition to that, you're actually going to also get some goodies from Jaclyn as well. I didn't say that last time, but you're getting goodies from both of us. And so for me, my name's Mélissa. It's funny, we've done this before. And so I'm trying to remember that this may be your first time meeting me. But I'm an ex-corporate marketer. So I spent about a decade in corporate, kind of climbing up that very corporate ladder, conforming to the various norms that were presented in front of me, and learning how to condition myself against my design. That being said, I loved what I did. I absolutely loved marketing. I absolutely loved the work that I did. And so for me, it was this constant struggle of trying to figure out how to be as much of myself as was allowed, while continuing to navigate and do the things that I needed to do to feel purpose within my career. That for me transitioned into the work of transformational coaching. And I can now say that I've worked with and supported thousands of women via in-person events, via speaking, etc., all on the journey of building lives and businesses around their passions. A few years into that, I found a fabulous client who was struggling with my pace. I had no clue that human design existed. And what I learned was that I had this beautiful talent of giving people massive energy in short bursts, of catalyzing change for them. But that when they then went off into the world and continued to work on their projects, that they maybe weren't in flow and they may burn out over time, because I am a manifesting generator 3-5. It's a very sleeping phoenix. It's a very fast design. So my journey with this client led me to a couple different people, Jaclyn being one of them. And I got to really dive deep. I got excited by her. She was very much my catalyst, and I nerded out in human design. For the last 12 months, I have been living by following my sacral at every turn and just taking it where it has taken me. It's caused me to invest so much in myself, changed all of my businesses, and really embrace my whole self. And it has been a beautiful journey. And so now I work in this area that we are calling energy ergonomics. The goal for me is to go back in and really change the face of how we work, especially since work is where we spend most of our time, with the goal of first helping you learn about yourself, and then helping you learn about others, because the lens that you're looking at people with is your own lens. And if I can show you human design, I can give you so many other lenses. So if you are here and this is your authority, I would very much suggest checking out the other ones. You will blow your mind to see how different people are, and it will heighten your compassion. Beyond that, I do a lot of things, and I love every single one of them. So I'm a crystal intuitive, sound healer, vibrational sound therapist. I am currently being certified in somatic breathwork, qigong, yoga. And mainly, I'm just obsessed in helping people find their desirable home frequencies, is what I call it, and just be in flow. So with that, if you have splenic authority, these are some of the things that you can do to come home to yourself and to make sure that we're not missing those messages that are coming through. This one, for me, is such a tricky one, in the sense that with other authorities, there is a little bit more give in terms of the timing. But with splenic authority, we really need to pay attention to those vibes. We can't fall into the hesitations, because then the moment is past. And there's such a beauty in that too, as someone who's obsessed with being in the moment. This is a call to action, if you have splenic authority, to find ways to be in the moment, to truly learn to trust yourself, and to find ways to communicate your method of working and relating with your inner knowing to others, so that it can be a safe space for you to act, and a space safe for them to act. Okay. And so the page that you're about to see is some of the activities that we will be sending to all of the folks who signed up for this session. So serene splenic authority. So everything that we go through goes through 3 stages. I want you to feel, I want you to heal, and I want you to flow. And so feel. So this is some of what we were talking about with Grace earlier. Feel your body and find your desirable home frequency. So when I say home frequency, that's a little bit of a big word for me, but easy to describe, right? We all have different modes that we're in. In the past, some of my home frequencies were overwhelm, anxiety, and guilt. Those are my less desirable ones. My current ones are joy, abundance, excitement, right? And so some of these are desirable, some of these are less desirable. And when we can identify them, it's a lot easier to get grounded. So many of us basically hang out in our funky frequencies. I call them funky ass frequencies. Like, we are just there all the time. When you have splenic authority, it is extremely important that you are not there, that you are at a place where you are grounded, you are present, because if we're not present, we will miss the messages when they come through. And so I have a baseline check-in here, and this is the Cliff Notes version. You will have a deeper dive version, but for today's presentation, I want to make sure we had time. But there will be a bunch of clarity questions, things like, what does it feel like to be relaxed in my body? How do I calm the noise in my mind? When I need to make decisions, what does my mind feel like? What activities support me in maintaining balance? Jaclyn gave a really cool hint earlier that I loved, which is like, is it a body message or is it a mind message, right? Is the body message coming first? And so introducing practices that cultivate presence is going to be key. I've got some here: meditation, yoga, qigong, dance, breath work. I can't believe breath work's not on here right now, but it will be by the time you get it. Breath work is so huge in this one. I do have a framework for y'all with Splenic authority, and it is called ACT. Okay. Why? Because when you get those intuitions, we actually want you to take action, right? So much of this is feeling that inner knowing and ignoring it. You're going to stop ignoring it, right? And so ACT. One, acknowledge your inner knowing. It's there for a reason. Don't try to figure out the reason, but acknowledge that it's here. Number two, communicate your decisions, feeling, and needs. And this one's an interesting one. It's not about, you don't need to communicate, right? But I would love for you to communicate with yourself and say, I'm going to trust this. And if you are in a situation where you are in partnership, where people are around you, you may need to communicate to that other person, because as Jaclyn gave her example earlier, a splenic authority could look like stepping out of a place, getting out of a situation, because we don't always have that immediate reason as to why. It may be difficult for somebody else to accept it. The example I like to give is we were at home here in Texas, and my husband, we were planning on going to an event, and he was like, we are not going. And the fun part is my husband is not always the stellar communicator, and he can struggle, and he's like, we can't go. And the good thing is, and I was like, what? And I'm like, no, but we're supposed to go. He's like, no, we can't go. And then I was like, oh, are you getting like a spidey sense thing? This is before I knew. And he's like, yes. And I said, okay. And now we can have that discussion, because he has saved our life about, 4 different times now. And so now I'm like, all right, we trust his spidey senses. The day I learned to do that was when he turned a car extremely last minute. A car sideswiped us, and his last minute action put the car within this much distance from me, meaning I would have died. And I was just like, okay, I trust whatever spidey sense is happening. I'm going to trust it. That day, literally a tornado came through. If we'd been in a car, we literally, with the time we had left, would have been on the highway in the area that the tornado hit. I give you such a dramatic one, but it's true. It's true. And it's happened. He saved my life so many times. And so trust it. But that is that communicate, because if you're with another person, it may not make any kind of logical sense. And frankly, it may be disappointing to them that we've got to shift plans. And so communicate your decisions, feelings, and needs. And then take action and transmute any funky frequencies if needed, right? Like, there's not time to beat up yourself. You did what you were supposed to do. You followed your authority. And so ACT, acknowledge your inner knowing, communicate your decisions, feelings, and needs if we need to, and take action and transmute any funky frequencies if necessary. All right. So the next ones are fun. And I just was thinking about, again, how do we get into our body, but get into our body in a way that builds trust? And so number 3 is take an adventure guided by your intuition. So go somewhere that feels safe to you. And so when I was thinking about this, we have a lake right by here, and there's like different paths that you can take. And I was like, okay, I would feel safe. I could go to the lake, and I just get used to trusting myself to just go wherever my intuition takes me. Sometimes the issue is that we don't trust our guidance because we haven't learned to trust what feels like spontaneity, or what feels like decisions that come from the ether, essentially. And so take an adventure guided by your intuition. Fun story with this one, always with the husband, because I don't have I don't really have any kind of activity in my spleen, unfortunately. I just love people who do. So we were in Paris, and we just started going on a walk around Paris. Paris is a beautiful place to take an adventure guided by your intuition. Would you believe? We start going on these twists and turns like you do in Paris. And we were supposed to be going to dinner at a specific place, because the other thing is I'm vegan. And so we needed a specific place. We end up in a restaurant, and that restaurant is a Cambodian restaurant. My husband's Cambodian, with a specific dish that is from the specific place that my husband's father is from in Cambodia. And they have vegan options. And it was just like twist, turn. And then it was like, I like the vibe of this area. I'm like, okay, let's go in here. And so again, take an adventure guided by your intuition. All right. And then practice flowing with snap decisions. Again, we can be conditioned to believe that a decision made quickly is not a decision that is appropriate or worthy. And so practice flowing with snap decisions. I was thinking about how can we do this in a fun way? And I'm gonna give you one. And if anyone does this, like this specific action, because I just wanted to give you some actions, but if anyone does this specific action, message me and I will literally give you a free like intro reading. Okay. Because I was thinking about, I'm only going to do it for the first 2 people who message me, just so you know. But I was thinking about, what's a snap decision? What's a fun game that has snap decisions? You know what came up? And I'm like, you know what came up, Jaclyn? Because I think Jaclyn would enjoy this. Musical chairs. Musical chairs.
You got to be impulsive if you want to win. Like, you can't think it through. You can't feel into it. It's got to be like, boom.
Because I was looking at other ones like tic-tac-toe, this, that, and I'm like, you can waste time, but musical chairs, you got to go. Mm-hmm. And so this might sound silly, but if you're someone who really struggles with it, and I'm that person that will do whatever it takes, but if you're someone who really struggles with it, I might get a group of friends and literally be like, all right, I got to practice this. Let's play musical chairs. So like I said, if anyone does this, hit me up. But my point is, practice flowing with snap decisions and find different ways. Musical chairs is certainly not the only way, but this is just as you start making them, practice flowing with them. And it might mean like you make them and you give yourself some affirmations and you're like, okay, we're going to flow with this. But there's also really fun ways to play around with this. There's different games, especially like it might be like speed chess, but speed chess not fast enough from my standpoint, right? But like there's different games and different ways to flow with this one, but make it fun. Okay, heal. You will get a video that it brings in heal. Heal is my framework for a mix of shadow work and a lot of abundance, right? So heal, we are holding space for our emotions. So I want you to hold space for any fears related to trusting your decision. There's some specific fears that pop up with specific gates within the spleen. And so I will actually include those of like, check out these fears and see if they popped up for you. Give them on for a try, right? And so, heal any fears. So we're going to hold space for that fear. Like, where did the fear of trusting the decision come from, right? Did you have a misstep? And I'm doing that mistakes, because I always see that you can learn from everything, right? There always are teachers, but let's pick a decision. You might have one right now, right? Hold space for that decision. And then let's expand the vision of what this decision could be. Like maybe you can actually think back to how that taught you something, how you learned something, or this is expanding the vision of how it could be different. Now we're going to decide some aligned actions that we need to take. And sometimes that action is as simple as I need to do some deeper work. Maybe I need to call some Jaclyn, dig into my shadow work. Maybe I'm going to write some affirmations, whatever it is. And then we will let it go, let it flow. But that is a question of how do you let it flow? And so we get to flow, right? So we feel, then we heal, then we flow. Different examples of how you could flow. I'm doing this for every authority because it's important, but I think it's especially important for the ones that require more trust or more waiting. And so love letter to your splenic authority. I would like you to write a real love letter to your splenic authority. If it pisses you off because you have a hard time honing your intuition, you can't feel certain things. If you're like, why is this my authority? I've heard this before, by the way. Like, why is this my authority? I hate this one. I wish I had a different one, right? Write the real letter. And then I want you to edit that letter and make it expansive and make it loving and make it empowered. And you might need to read that, but sometimes just even doing that process, why do you actually love this, right? Give vocabulary to your vibes, right? It's all about vibes. So find the words to describe your splenic authority to others. That's super important. We need to be able, and it could say, I have a spidey sense, like, or I have a thing, right? Maybe inner knowing feels really uncomfortable to you. And there's another reality is like, you might be scared. So I didn't say it here, but in the heel, you might be scared of your own authority. I can honestly say that as I've stepped more and more and more into my magic, there have been moments I've been scared. And so if you're scared, again, I'm scared of you. I think it's creepy that I get these instincts and shit happens. Be real, okay? And then once we've done our love letter and we've gotten a little bit more expansive with it, give vocabulary to your vibes. Find words to explain them to others. Make it expansive. Make it fun too, right? And then create woofulness practices that support sticking to your authority. Woofulness, woo-woo plus mindfulness. How do we set ourselves up for success? I have one in here, truth affirmations to build trust, so that we can get anchored in like the truth of my authority is. I've made some decisions in the past. They've been super helpful for me, right? And then also, if we go all the way back up, all of those presence things are woofulness practices, right? The yoga, the mindset work, even shadow work, right? These are different practices. And if we're doing them on a consistent basis, it can help us stay aligned and trust our authority. And finally, energy ergonomics. So as it relates to business and partnerships and work, I put create a proactive partnership plan. This is really important, right? People may not understand your intuition. My example for this one, and again, we've got about 5 minutes. So if you have questions, this is the moment to put them in chat. But my example for this one is I have a very good friend, and there are two partners, and they are running a multi-million-dollar business at this point. And one is a splenic projector, and one is a generator with emotional authority. And so as you're thinking about partnership, a big word is ownership, right? As someone who has splenic authority, it's really important to know, like, what do you own? Because if you know what you own, then you can make those snap decisions. If there are things that maybe you don't own or that aren't yours, you may have to wait and you may have to go with whatever's happening. And if over time that's not in alignment with you, you may have to leave. And so there's real realities of this. And then there's people accepting it. And then there's you also accepting the authority of others. And so I think for me, this is one of the trickiest pieces of it, because with this authority, sometimes it's harder to have those communications too, especially if you're in more corporate environments, to try to explain to someone you've just got an inner knowing that they need to trust can be really difficult. And so as you create systems to support you, you'll be set up for success. All right. So all of those and those in more detailed format will be available, and make sure you sign up formally for this event, even retroactively. It'll be with the replay, etc. I don't think we have any more questions coming through, but I'm going to give people 1 or 2 minutes in case we're getting a little delay here. But if you have any questions, please let us know. And Grace, if you're still with us, let me know if that answered your question and gave you some goodies about honing your intuition. Anything else you want to add, Jaclyn?
Just because I always go back to shadow work. One of the things I was thinking about as you were talking was like how we get conditioned away from, we get labeled with words sometimes when we have splenic authority with words like impulsive or reckless, or, you move too quick, or, where's the evidence? And so that's one of the things that like, I kind of taking those labels and like, what is my relationship to that word? Is that an identity I own, etc.? Is that something that's been put on me? When has that actually been helpful and expansive? Like all the times, like your spidey sense saved you from being in the tornado. Like that's the times you want to like own those, right? I see Grace as a follow-up too. Yeah.
When you're asking what do you own, are you referring to tangible or abstract things? That example I was talking about in partnerships and business relationships. And in those, yay, I'm glad it was helpful. In those, you may literally own a part of the business. So in my friend example, right, one of them is head of certain parts of business decisions, and the other one manages all of the community stuff. And so if he's feeling funky and has some funky vibes and they're related to community, he doesn't own that. So it literally can be, I tangibly own this, like this is my dog and I'm going to do what I'm going to do with it, or not. As it relates to other things, I can say like within our marriage, like my husband's spidey sense trumps our plans. So if Kevin has like a funky spidey sense and it's my mom's birthday dinner, Mom and us we're just not going to birthday dinner. And so we'll actually think through like just the dynamics of whose authority may rule in certain instances. And that's an interesting way of kind of going about it, but it allows us to stay in alignment and actually work through our authority. So I think that it's tangible, but sometimes it's not tangible either.
And sometimes it's like if you get invited to somebody else's birthday dinner, say it's like your partner's friend, and you get a weird feeling about the restaurant, you don't get to own everybody leaves and they go to a different restaurant. It's more of like you can decide I'm going to not stay very long, or I don't feel comfortable here. But it's like we also want to think about, again, ourself and community, kind of like you were saying, like where do I have agency? Where don't I? Where do I have ownership? What's the impact?
Yeah, like
is it just for me or
Yep, you're only responsible for yourself until you're responsible for others.
Yeah. It's like you have to think about like if I make this choice, what is the impact of that too? And so like, yeah. It's awesome. Not always clean, but
thank you for asking that follow-up.
Yeah.
Grace. I'm happy that it makes sense now, and we definitely want it to be understood. And as I send out the follow-ups with that, we'll walk through that in greater detail. And Jaclyn, I'm definitely going to add the labels in the heal section. I
love that.
Judgments, but I like the idea of not just thinking about judgments, but maybe the labels you've given yourself.
And those gates, I love that you mentioned that earlier, because the gates themselves each have their own little fear. Like gate 57 is like, you get that spidey sense about people lying to you. And like, what if you have conditioning around like, calling people out or whatever. Like, so there's always like a shadowy side, but I think again, if the fears are where we mine for gold, like a lot of times they can be, how do we flip and turn on? I love the expansive language, the love letter. Like, how do we turn that into something that we're like, yeah, I've got this gift. And it's weird, but it's awesome. Like, that's how I view my spleen. My spleen is like, I don't know. It knows. I don't know how it knows. It just does.
And you may say weird, and someone might be like, you know what? It's not weird.
Yeah.
And exactly. So it's just like, the other thing is like, you define expansive language.
Yeah.
It's got to feel good to you. And I also think about like, how do other people perceive it? Because we always train people to how to treat us.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay, cool. And so with that, if we have no other questions, I do want to talk about, we've got some things coming. So just check us out. Stay tuned. Jaclyn and I are going to be collaborating on some bigger scale opportunities for y'all to get into your body. Jaclyn mentioned her Catalyst, her membership that's going to be launching. She's still running Karmic Studies. I'm in it. It's amazing. And I am going to be relaunching by December, because I flow with my sacral these days. By December, I will be relaunching Club Workflow, which is my monthly membership.
I'm in it. It's amazing.
And we have two versions of that. So Beeline for Wonderland, everything about it is helping you become more of you at every moment, and then take that more of you and use that to build your wonderland. So whether that's a business or make a bunch of shifts in your life. And then we're also going to be relaunching the more accessible version of Club Workflow that I'm super excited about because I can finally manage it again. I'm like, yay! My sacral finally says yes, and that one we're going to dig into the human design transits that are coming up week to week to week and get ahead of them so we can use that to more efficiently plan our lives. I'm a big planner, and so it's both for planning and then again doing that shadow plus abundance work, less on the shadows than my dear friend Jaclyn.
Where I live in the Shadowlands, but
I
beautiful, there's beauty there.
That if you do not have a shadow work practice, you need one, like stat. If you care about like growth, expansion, you know, all that.
It helps the abundance practice flourish.
The other thing I want to say is all of this is simple, but it's not always easy. It's simple, but it's not always easy. And so just know that as you're looking at this, it's like, okay, you said it's simple, but it's not always easy to stick with it. And so hopefully we've given you a bunch of tips of how to stick with it. But when you stick with it, it will change your life. It will change your life. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Grace. Thank you for everyone who's joining live and then everyone who's going to watch on the replay. And again, if you did not register, head up to woofulness.com/authority. Even if you're coming after the fact, you can register for the replay and that will trigger the homework and the practices. Okay. Have a great day, y'all. And thank you so much. Bye.